Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Who is that? We just have Colin user on your name.
Oh,
I
it's
got
Nancy Lulu. How's everything?
Hey, Nancy.
Hello, Colin
Um,
user one.
Hi. I don't know what's wrong. I'm having trouble getting in with the link. I re-downloaded the app. I'm on my phone.
Oh,
It's not working. But in any case, my colleague should be on.
yeah,
If she's
Shayna's
not on,
on and we've already
She is
tested.
already.
We're good.
right. Great, great. And unfortunately, I can't sit in for the meeting. I have another meeting. But my colleague is there. You're in good hands. And,
Thank you for
hope everyone's doing well.
thanks for the guest appearance, Nancy Barden here.
Thank you, Barton. It's 6:30, so the floor is all yours. Enjoy.
Hindi, you want to do the intro and start her up?
on mute button.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I just got a new computer set up, so good evening, everyone. Are we starting with are we starting with Shayna or okay? So so good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's having a good thank you everyone for coming. Give me 1 second, I'm sorry. So I would like to introduce our presentation for human trafficking, and we have Shayna Fuller here. She came early, so we're gonna have her start off our meeting. Thank you so much for coming.
Welcome everyone. Thanks for inviting me to speak. I do have slides. I might not get through all of them. Normally when I do a presentation, it's like an hour, but I will give you all the shorter version. And then I'm always happy to do like a follow-up, especially if folks have organizations that they're a part of or, um, you know, churches, PTA, anything like that. We do training presentations for everyone. So yeah, my name is Shayna Fuller. I've been with the Brooklyn DA's office for almost 2 years in the human trafficking unit. My role specifically, I'm not an attorney, I'm not law enforcement, but I am the director of our human trafficking task force here in Brooklyn. So the federal government funds these task forces all over the country. And kind of the point of the task force is to bring together law enforcement and social service providers. So we co-lead the Brooklyn Task Force, our unit here in the DA's office, along with Safe Horizon, who some of you may be familiar with. They're a big social service provider in the city. They have a lot of different programs, but they have an anti-trafficking program. So we co-chair the task force together. And on the task force, we have lots of legal service providers, lots of housing programs, a lot of local and federal law enforcement members, lots of different city agencies. And so we have meetings, we kind of work together on projects. The point of the task force is just to bring people together so that we're all collaborating and not, siloed, doing our own thing without talking to one another. It works. We have a lot of cases here that, we may have victims that have multiple things going on in different boroughs. And so my boss, David Weiss, is the chief of the human trafficking unit. He, I'm pretty sure, has all the other prosecutors and all the other boroughs on speed dial. We're always talking to each other so that we're all on the same page. So let me go ahead and share my presentation. And just a little bit more about me. Before I was here, I was in Chicago doing the exact same thing. I used to be the coordinator of the Human Trafficking Task Force in Chicago. I went to grad school for public health. And then I actually grew up in the Atlanta area in Georgia, but I lived in Chicago for like 12 years. So let me start. And feel free to put questions in the chat as we go along. And that way, when we get to Q&A, I can kind of look at them. But yeah, as questions come up, you can put them in the chat. I talked about the task force. Okay, I always like to start with this slide. This is something we started to include in our trainings back in Chicago. But, a lot of you may be familiar with the concept of human trafficking from probably TV shows or movies. I like to tell folks, during the pandemic, during lockdown, I binge watched all of Law and Order SVU. the years, you saw their depictions of human trafficking get more and more accurate over time, which was cool to see that progression. Their writers are pretty good with actually studying, the topics that they cover. So something important is, you may have heard of this concept, implicit bias, but it's something that if you're a human living on Earth, you have it. It's just our brains trying to make sense of the world. And so, our brain tries to pick up on patterns and things like that, right? So kind of unconsciously, right? If we are used to walking into a hospital and the person that takes your blood pressure is a woman, right? You're going to kind of start to expect, right, nurses to be women. So maybe the first time you get a male nurse, you're a little caught off guard because you're not used to that, right? You may know in your brain intellectually that there are male nurses, but right, most of your experience has been with female nurses. So that's all implicit bias is, right? Your brain trying to make sense of the world by kind of putting patterns together. But it's just something that is important to be aware of because there may be human trafficking victims in your community walking around, and you may have an idea in your head of what a human trafficking victim looks like or what they dress like, how they talk, how they present. And that may be the case some of the time, but not all the time. It's so just important that there is no singular face of a human trafficking victim. It really can be anyone. And so these are the federal definitions for sex and labor trafficking. I won't read them because they're very wordy, but I will break them down on the next slide. So when we're talking about human trafficking, we have to have kind of three things going on. So there has to be a process in place, there has to be a means, and then there has to be an end. So when we talk about a process, what that looks like is what we call recruitment. So for sex trafficking, for example, let's say there are young girls leaving school, leaving high school, or walking through the mall, and someone approaches them, flattering them, telling them they look nice, maybe handing them a card and saying, I have this photography business or I have this modeling business, and you can come take pictures because you're so beautiful and you can make money, right? We as adults might think, that could be a scam, don't call this number or don't follow this person, but we're talking about young people, right? That prefrontal cortex that handles decision making is not done developing yet. And so they may, right, fall for something like that. Let's say they go and they think it's harmless. Maybe they don't tell their parents because they think their parents will say no. And let's say they show up, they take some pictures that are fine at first, and then that person has some lingerie and they say, hey, okay, we actually pay more if you take pictures wearing this. How about that? Maybe one of the girls feels uncomfortable and she wants to leave, but someone else really needs that money because she's helping support her family. And so she agrees. So all of this, right, in this case, even though it's consensual on their part, if they're minors, right, then we're getting into kind of sketchy territory. So where the force, fraud, and coercion comes in is, let's say that person doesn't want to go back and take any more photos, but that person now has all of these photos of them and maybe they blackmail them and they threaten to post them online or to show them to their parents. That's where we start to see that force, fraud, and coercion come in. It's not always physical, right? I think in movies and TV shows, the physical force aspect is overemphasized. A lot of our cases, that person may have never been physically assaulted. Maybe they were just blackmailed. Maybe they were told that they had to do A, B, and C because they were threatened with harm or they were threatened with their family being harmed. And so in this scenario I just described, maybe they feel like, okay, I have to go back because this person is blackmailing me. And now instead of taking pictures, they are having to, post things online and get men to agree to meet up with them to have sex with them for money. So that's just an example of a scenario that can happen. And we see that type of stuff a lot with folks coming from out of state, right? So maybe they meet a guy online, they're talking, maybe they think this person's going to be my boyfriend, or they're going to show me around the city. And then they arrive, and instead of being put up in this fancy hotel, right, they end up in some apartment, right, in East Brooklyn somewhere, and they are forced to engage in, these commercial sex acts kind of against their will. With labor trafficking, the way we see this is with a lot of folks who are coming from other countries, or they're undocumented, and they just want to find work to support their family. So they may work a lot of jobs, right, that are cash only or under the table. And they're being threatened all the time with, being reported to law enforcement or being deported if they don't work 14, 16, 18 hours. And they're being paid next to nothing, right? And so with that, a lot of folks come here and they think, okay, I'm going to get this job and I'm going to make A, B, and C, like I'm going to make this much money. And then they find out the fraud piece, right? Like it's not what they had hoped, or it's not what they were promised initially. And then they end up kind of in this involuntary servitude situation. So that's just a few examples. I think I have another diagram. Yeah, so some of those examples of force, fraud, and coercion. So the way that the law is set up nationally and also in New York, if you're a minor, if you're under the age of 18 and you are engaged in any type of commercial sex, anything, then you're automatically considered to be a victim of human trafficking. But if you're an adult, right, because we know adults can engage in prostitution or sex work, whatever word you use, of your own volition, if you're an adult, we have to prove that there's force, fraud, and coercion involved. So like I said, that force can be physical violence or some form of assault. It can involve kidnapping. I always tell people, 9 times out of 10, none of our cases involved any type of kidnapping. I think people, that is what you hear about, right, on social media or movies, TV, but 9 times out of 10, that person is not being, chained to a bed in a basement. They're actually able to move freely, but again, that person maybe has getting 50, 60 texts from their pimp or their trafficker throughout the day. Maybe the person has their location, so they don't even have to be with them, but they know where they are at all times because they're monitoring them. So there's a lot of ways psychologically that these traffickers are controlling people. With fraud, like I said, you've been tricked because you've been told one thing and then you find out it's something else. Or you were lied to about what the working conditions are actually going to be like, how much you were actually going to get paid. And then that coercion piece. So again, threatening to be deported, threatening to harm you or someone you love, incurring debt. So, and again, this happens a lot with folks coming from other countries. A lot of times people pay thousands of dollars to get legal work authorization, legal work visas, and the employer arranges it for them and says, okay, great, you're going to go work at this hotel, or you're going to get to the US and you're going to work at a hospital, or you're going to work, on this farm. And they arrive, and then that person who is in charge of them once they get here confiscates all their papers and says they're going to keep them safe for them, but really they're holding them kind of hostage. And so if that person wanted to leave, they don't have access to their passport or their documents that they would need on their person to prove that they're here legally, actually. And whoever they paid all the money to even arrive here, that person is saying, okay, you have to pay me back. And so they may think, well, I'll make enough money in the States to pay that person back in a year or two. But once they arrive here, they're getting money taken out of their paychecks for shelter, or what they thought would be included is not included. Or maybe their employer is saying, okay, well, you have to have all this work gear that's getting taken out of your paycheck. And so that person is just in this kind of insurmountable amount of debt, and they can't ever kind of get out of that hole. So they're kind of chained to this employer, if that makes sense. Common myths and misconceptions. Trafficked persons are always immigrants from other countries. While that's a vulnerability, right? If you're new here and you don't really speak English, easy for you to get taken advantage of. But most of our cases in our office are folks who were born in Brooklyn and they've never left Brooklyn or New York. Human trafficking and human smuggling get confused a lot. So smuggling is a crime involving crossing a border. That can be voluntary or involuntary, but that is separate from human trafficking, which is, again, that crime against that person, making that person do something against their will. There can be elements of physical restraint, physical force, like I said, but it doesn't have to be involved. And then, a lot of us, right, maybe we've lived fairly comfortable lives, and so it's hard for us to imagine being in a situation like that. So we think to ourselves, well, clearly, if this were happening to me, I would ask for help, right? I would run out into the street and flag down the first cop I saw and ask for help. But the reality is a lot of victims of trafficking either A, don't realize that what's happening to them is illegal, that it's wrong, that there's something that can be done about it, or they've been kind of told over and over again that they can't trust anyone, that, you know, no one's going to care, no one's going to listen to them. And so they may not identify as a victim or know that there's help for them. Some common venues for sex and labor trafficking that we see. These are some examples that come from the National Human Trafficking Hotline. They kind of keep track of the calls that they receive and kind of what was involved in those cases. And so you could put this in the chat box. You don't have to unmute, but I always like to ask folks if any of this surprises anyone. You know, a lot of these you might look and say, okay, well, sure, maybe there's sketchy, shady things going on. Especially on the sex trafficking side, maybe not so shocking, but on the labor trafficking side, I feel like people are always surprised to see like nail salons, or carnivals and fairs, which I've never thought about because, you know, those traveling carnivals that set up in the parking lot and then leave. My mother never allowed me to go to those because she didn't trust the rides. But if you think about it, those are set up, right, for a few days and they quickly move to the next town. So a lot of folks who are working those carnivals, who are setting up the rides, who are operating the rides, a lot of times, you know, they don't speak English. They have to work all day for the amount of time that the carnival's in town. And so even if they're not being paid what they're supposed to be paid or they're being mistreated, they're going to pack up and move in a few days. So what is the point of asking for help or letting someone know what's going on? And so there's a lot of, I think, labor exploitation that can happen in those situations. These I will not share just for sake of time, but I can put the link in the chat later, but there is an organization in the UK and they've actually made some really great kind of vignette videos to kind of show different examples of trafficking, and they're just really well produced. And so they have different videos for different scenarios that are really good. Okay, so just like anyone can be a victim, anyone can be a trafficker. Again, you may, you know, if I said to close your eyes and picture what a pimp looks like, we might all think of kind of the stereotypical, right, like idea of what a pimp looks like. But it could be anyone. And so, you know, I always like to give this example. Back in Chicago, we had a case where this woman who was, I believe, in her 60s, looked like she could be my grandmother. But she claimed to be a pastor. She had this ministry that she had started where she claimed that she wanted to help people who were down on their luck. And so she somehow had connected to all these folks who either had had drug problems or had experienced homelessness. And she had a lot of these folks working at this hotel or motel at, you know, being like the front desk clerk person. And she was instructing them to kind of engage in this fraud so that she could have more money be poured into her ministry. And the way that she kind of controlled these folks is she said, you know, that God would not be pleased with them unless they did what she told them to do, or God would not help them get to a better place in their lives if they didn't contribute more money to their ministry. So you had all these folks who, you know, trusted her and, you know, believed the things that she was saying. Some of them were working more than one job. They're working 2 jobs, and they were giving most of their money to this woman. And again, she looked harmless to me, but she ended up being indicted for labor trafficking because she had kind of used spirituality and spiritual abuse to force these folks into giving her most of their money. And so, you know, it could be anyone at the end of the day. People like to ask me about statistics. I don't find them super helpful because I like to remind folks that human trafficking is a crime. So we're never going to have super accurate numbers on how often it's happening. We have case data that my boss would not allow me to share normally with you all, but we keep very detailed stats on kind of our cases that we're seeing in Brooklyn because we have to report that to the government. But something to get a better picture for you all, if you go to this website, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, they have a great stats by state. And so you can go click on statistics, you can go down to New York, and it will show you for 2023, for 2022, for 2021, you know, how many calls they received to the hotline number from New York State and kind of what the demographics of the folks involved were, what were the kind of places that the exploitation was happening. And that kind of gives you an idea. But again, you have to take that with a grain of salt because not everyone calls the national hotline number. A lot of our cases come from NYPD and they come straight to us, or someone calls our command center in the DA's office that's 24/7 kind of hotline, and then they go straight to my boss. So they're not capturing everything at the national level, if that makes sense. They're just capturing kind of part of the picture. So you're only ever going to get like kind of a slice of the picture that will give you an idea, but it's not the whole thing. And we know trafficking is something that's underreported also. I will just put these up. So, I tell people that while human trafficking is something that can happen to anyone, traffickers are all about control, right? Just like domestic violence, a person who is an abuser or who wants to take advantage of someone, they're always going to pick an easy target, if that makes sense. And so, youth or adults who have lots of protective factors in their life, maybe they have really good social support system, they have family that cares about them, friends that care about them, they have a place to stay, they have a job, they're less likely to be targeted than someone who maybe doesn't have those things. And so these are kind of some common vulnerability factors. So we talked about new immigrants, right? Maybe you're new to the country, you have a substance use disorder, you lack economic opportunity or stable housing, you have a developmental or learning disability. So lots of things that can contribute to you being more likely to be targeted. I talked about this a little bit. I'll skip to this. This is something that's used in just violence prevention in general, but this is called the power and control wheel. And so just illustrating all the different ways that someone can be coerced or controlled. Traffickers, pimps, abusers, they're big on isolating someone, right? So maybe they move them around a lot, or they don't let them talk to their family or friends. They're often intimidated. So we've had traffickers, they'll lie to the person and tell them that, oh, that cop down the street on the corner works for me. Like we're friends. So you can't trust him. There's just all these different ways that folks are controlled. Economic abuse is a huge one folks don't talk about a lot. We have a lot of trafficking victims who the pimp or the trafficker had them open new credit cards in their name and were using their credit cards to do to all types of illegal activity or to buy things. And so even after that person gets out of the trafficking situation, their credit score is like terrible, not because of them, but because this person did that to them. And so that's another thing that they have to kind of fix or recover from when they get out of the situation. So just things that you might not think about. Just some red flags, because folks always want to know what to look for. Now I will emphasize, you all are just community members. We're not expecting you to go busting down doors or doing investigations yourselves, but these are things that you can kind of keep an eye out for. And I always like to say with the red flags, we're looking for a combination of these. So, for youth, for example, if you're a teacher, if you're someone who works with youth, these youth, you work with them regularly, you kind of know what people's financial situation is over time, right? So if you have a student, you know that their family can't afford a lot of nice things, and all of a sudden they have the newest iPhone or they have some fancy watch, right? You just ask the question and be like, oh, like, was that a birthday gift? Like, where'd that come from? Because we know that pimps and traffickers will use that in the grooming process. They'll buy them lots of nice things and try to get them, feeling like, okay, this person I need to stay connected to because they do nice things for me. And then the abuse, right, or the exploitation happens later. With labor trafficking specifically, that person maybe is in control of their own money, or they're working very late hours, they're super exhausted. Maybe they talk about how they're not allowed to take breaks from work, or they want to leave their job, but they can't for some reason. It just feels like, a big red flag is if they live where they work. One time I was in an Uber, and my driver started talking to me. It was really late at night, and I didn't really feel like talking to him, but he was telling me that he takes his car. I told him what I did for work, and he told me that he takes his car to this mechanic shop, and all the guys that worked at the mechanic shop were Ukrainian, and he speaks Ukrainian, so sometimes he chats with the mechanics. And one of the guys he knows was saying that the boss is kind of mean and makes him work really late hours, but the boss was also his landlord and he lived above the mechanic shop. And he was like, what do you think about that? And I was like, that doesn't sound great. Maybe, because a red flag is if you live where you work. There's just a lot of power and control, right, to have over someone if your boss is also your landlord. So just an example. And I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to skip a few slides here and just go through these really quickly. So again, if you see something in the community that concerns you, if you have concerns about someone in your life that you know, it never hurts to ask questions, especially when we're thinking about young people. As we all, right, have matured and become adults, we've learned over time what should be true of a relationship or what should be true of a work situation. So just questions about, do you trust this person? Have they ever told you what to do or tried to control you? Do they make you feel unsafe? Have you been pressured to do anything you don't want to do? Does this person respect your boundaries? Do they care when you go out to hang out with your friends, or are they constantly blowing up your phone and asking who you're with? Right? These situations don't always start like day one, this person is being trafficked, right? Like this is a slow kind of process for someone to be groomed and kind of tricked into doing something. So it takes time. And so this is just stuff that you can cover with anyone in your life, right? Like in a healthy relationship, you're not being controlled or manipulated. This person respects your privacy or your wishes. You feel safe to speak up if something's bothering you. Same with work. My first job in high school was at the YMCA. I taught a gymnastics and dance class to little kids. I was paid fairly because it was, a good situation. But I don't remember my parents sitting me down and going through, like, here's what's happening on your paycheck. This is what they're taking out for Social Security or for whatever, right? Like, everything was fine, but they didn't sit down and explain that to me. So again, if you have kids or you have young people in your life, or friends, right? Maybe you know a friend who's new to this country and you can kind of help them understand, like, this is what's fair, this is what's not fair. You should be able to take breaks at work. You should be able to go to the bathroom without asking for permission. There are things that should be in place for this to be a safe and fair work situation. So here are the hotline numbers. So if you live in Brooklyn, this is the Kings County District Attorney's Office hotline. Like I said, we have a command center 24/7 upstairs. They will always call my boss or loop him in if it's something that sounds like it could be trafficking. This is the number for Safe Horizons anti-trafficking program. And then that's the national hotline number. Some resources. I really like to highlight this last one at the bottom. So even though it's not exactly trafficking, a lot of folks have questions about internet safety and, kids being safe online. So this website, missingkids.org, has a program called NetSmarts. It's really cute. They have these little like illustrations and cartoons, but it just kind of goes through basic internet safety tips for young people. And I can put that in the chat later too. All right, this is my contact information. I know that was really quick. But I will stop sharing my screen. I can also put my contact information in the chat, but I do want to have time for a few questions. And I can't see the chat right now because I'm sharing my screen, so I'll stop.
Thank you so much, Shayna. We have, actually, my co-chair is raising his hand. He has a question.
Oh, okay, yes, go ahead. And then I'll look at the chat after.
Thanks, Shanna. That was great. Really appreciate it. Two quick questions. The first, is it safe to assume that with the influx of migrants we've had recently, there's been a spike in trafficking incidents?
Yes, I think so. I feel confident saying that. For example, my boss and I went out to Williamsburg a couple months ago because there was a NYPD officer, that's his community area, and he had noticed a lot of the migrant women have been kind of gathering in this one spot to be picked up during the day to go clean houses. And so we went out there to like set up a table and kind of, he could speak Spanish, that officer, so he was kind of talking to them about, how to be safe, right? Because that is scary. You're going into a random person's house to clean their house and you're hoping they pay you. And so, some of them had been fine. And then others had made reports of like being assaulted or things once they were inside random people's homes. And so, you know, again, it's terrible because these people are in a very desperate situation. They're just trying to make money. And so just letting them know that, you know, yes, even if you don't have right legal documentation, if something like that happens to you, right, here's what you can do. You know, here's what you can report to us. You know, we're not going to automatically, you know, send you to ICE to get deported, right? Here's kind of rights that you have as a human being if you're in this work situation that turns out to not be a good situation. And so, yeah, and I think, you know, on the other side with the men, you know, a lot of them are doing these delivery worker jobs or construction jobs, like anywhere folks can find work. And I think, you know, people who are out to take advantage of that, exploit people, they know that these people don't really have any other choice, right? A lot of them, they're waiting on work authorization. I think some of them, depending on what country they came from, like I know if they're from Venezuela, they offer that program where they can have temporary work authorization. And our office actually ran like a clinic for that. And it was like all day long. I mean, it's crazy, all this paperwork they had to bring. And we had lots of amazing people who were working pro bono to help them kind of put those packets together. But even after we got all that together, I think it takes a while for them to hear back. And so, you know, there are people who want cheap labor and who are definitely exploiting these folks because they know that the system is a mess. And you know, it's unfortunate, but
And it sounds, you've
yeah,
mentioned NYPD a couple of times. Are they like your main source of leads?
yeah, I would say so, because any federal cases go to the U.S. attorney, or we have cases that start local and then we find out it's kind of bigger than that, or it's connected to stuff going on in other states and it ends up being federal. But yeah, the NYPD, they have a great human trafficking team and some human trafficking detectives that we work with very closely. So
Last quick question. And how does Brooklyn feature vis-a-vis the other boroughs? Are we more, you know, do we have a particular profile or are we just sort of 1 out of 5?
yeah, I think just 1 out of 5. I mean, it
Okay.
looks different probably. So like for example, because I was telling my friend about this the other day that, for example, a lot of the brothel situations, which are we see more like in the Asian community, well, there's a lot of that happening in Flushing, right, which would be Queens kind of area. Whereas here, and we have some great local organizations like Garden of Hope, Womankind that work with the Asian population. But what we see more in Brooklyn and like Sunset Park area is like the massage parlor stuff where, you know, women are being forced to do other things. So it just might look different depending on the area. But yeah, I wouldn't say, I mean, Brooklyn is big, but so is Manhattan, right? So is the Bronx, so is Queens. So yeah, I can't say how we compare to the other boroughs, but it just looks different depending on the area.
Just curious. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Sorry to take so much of your time.
No, it's okay. And then in the chat, yes, able to do presentations at schools anytime. And yeah, I mean, again, the folks kind of who are street vending, unless someone is kind of collecting their money to the side or somewhere else where you can't see, that wouldn't necessarily be considered trafficking. Again, a lot of these women are just doing what they did in their country, right? And so that's the same with the folks. I'm sure people seen selling candy on the train, right? And they have the kids with them or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I don't think we've dealt with any of those cases in particular. That's kind of hard. A lot of the street vending or the street sales stuff, it's tricky because I don't know that that's necessarily being reported as trafficking, if that makes sense. And I don't know of any reports to ACS in terms of the children and stuff. I'm not sure about that, so I can't speak to that.
Is there anything we can do to like get the message out that people don't have, like immigrants or people don't have to accept bad conditions and that they have rights, and you know, what can we do to get that message out more?
Yeah, I can share with you all kind of via email. Maybe you can share it with the group, but the Department of Labor has created some great resources in like English, Spanish, Polish, Korean, any language, but they have put together some good know your rights information for youth and adults that's specific to like work situation, where it kind of outlines if this stuff is happening at your job, that's illegal, right? And here's what you do. And so, yeah, I have some of that information that I can share. So Department of Labor, the mayor's office, they definitely are working on kind of getting that information out there. We're always doing training and kind of outreach in the community on that end to try to get that information out to folks. A lot of the, migrant clinics or migrant shelters where people are housed, right? We've had kind of fairs where we, give people clothes and food and stuff, but also talk to them about that. And so, unfortunately, a lot of folks are just really concerned with, like I said, that work authorization and trying to figure out how to be here legally. And that's kind of their main concern. And then maybe later they might write reports and things have happened. But a lot of folks, that's not like top of mind for them. But we are providing those resources where we can.
You know how they have like the more you know commercials on TV, maybe?
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't know if you all have noticed, I know in my train station in Brooklyn, I've noticed, I think it's the Association for Children and Families, the national organization, ACF. They've put ads in different languages on some of the train platforms on the like electronic screen where it talks about, are you being made to do something you don't want to do with money or with related to sex trafficking or labor trafficking? I've seen some of those ads, and so they have the national hotline number on there. So yeah, there's a lot of signage that's been put up, and I know the governor has passed a lot of laws where signage should be up everywhere. Now, whether folks are like following that, I always ask like, well, what happens if they don't? And the enforcement side of it is kind of not great, but the law says that certain places, even liquor stores, should have the national hotline number up visibly for the public. It's just whether or not people are doing it is another thing.
Thank you so much.
There's one more hand. I don't know if we have time, Joe. Oh, I think you're muted.
Is that better? Not yet.
Yes, we can hear you now. Oh,
You popped out again, Joe.
Joe, you're on mute.
I think that the crux of the situation, Ms. Fuller, is that these people are illegal aliens and they don't have tax numbers. They don't have social security numbers. And that's going to be the problem. That's the source of the problem. That's the source of the extortion that people have over them. Is there any vehicle facility for them to have some sort of a ID number that would be legal? Then they could work. Right now, they can't work.
yeah, and I'm sure you've seen, right, like the mayor, Eric Adams, has complained about on the federal side, right? Like he's trying to push more of this work authorization through for some of these groups because he knows they want to work, but it's just really slow on the federal side, them deciding. Like I said, they've kind of decided certain countries are first in line for whatever reason. It's just been quite slow, So yeah, no, it's definitely a government bureaucracy issue. But like I said, a lot of our cases in the Brooklyn office, we don't even have a lot of labor trafficking cases, to be honest, that we've dealt with. Most of them are sex trafficking, and those are U.S. citizens. So that's more of what we're seeing.
I had a situation 20 years ago. A trainer, she was.
You want to jump in with a time check?
Yeah, 1 second. It was about 20 years ago. The trainer, her husband was a cop down in the 6-1. They lived. Yeah, there was a brothel right next door, and I came to I went to the district deputy district attorney at the time. He said, "Joe, we normally don't even leave." My investigated. He said, "God bless you." We closed down six brothels that were sex trafficked. There were sex slaves that really was going on. It was not a victimless crime at all, and so that's the.
Yeah, and that's where you as community members come in. When I was in Chicago, you were hard pressed to get the police to care about anything besides all the gun violence going on. That was they had tunnel vision, right? And so based on community members speaking up and saying, we've noticed this in the neighborhood, this is an issue, kind of that community pressure can change a lot of things. So absolutely. All right, I think I'm out of time.
Yes.
But I'm going to keep putting things in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shannon. This was so informative and helpful, and thank you. So our next
Thanks,
our next presentation is by Mr. Kozo from the Fire Safety Unit representative. He's our fire safety education representative. Are you ready to speak, Mr. Koza?
Hello, everyone. How's it going?
Hi, welcome. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure. A lot of good information there from Ms. Fuller. Thank you very much. So my name is actually Firefighter Martinez. I'm using Kozo's account. I'm a firefighter for the city of New York. I'm currently in the fire safety unit, basically spreading fire safety and preventative stuff for the home, for fires, and making sure people have smoke alarms and such. I'll go through a quick fire safety presentation with all my props and such. I'll try not to make it too long, and I'll leave some room for questioning if that's okay. All right. So as far as fires at home, most people like to cook at home and like to multitask, and they forget that they're cooking. Right. That's usually where fires usually happen in the home is kitchen fires. So they'll multitask, they'll go on their phones, they'll enter the doors and forget that they're cooking. So a good practice that we have is to actually leave your oven mitt on. So by leaving your oven mitt on, you leaving your kitchen, you'll remember that you were cooking by just looking at your hand. It's just something to help you remind you that you were cooking. Also, technology, people have phones in their pocket. You set a timer on your phone for 10, 20 minutes, whatever you're cooking, it'll go off and it'll remind you that you're cooking to go back to the kitchen. Because it's still the number one fires caused in the city are caused from kitchen fires. So definitely a good practice is to use your oven mitt. And most kitchen fires are grease fires, right? So you never put water on a grease fire because it'll make it worse. So what you want to do is actually make sure you have a lid that fits the pan that you're cooking with. So by you putting the lid on the pan, it removes the oxygen from the equation. When you remove the oxygen from a fire, you remove the fire. So always a good practice to have a lid that fits the pan that you're cooking on. Also, a lot of people don't know is baking soda actually puts out grease fires. So if you have baking soda at home, most people have it in their cabinets, their refrigerators, and such, and it works very well to put out grease fires. Basically, smother the grease fire, and you should be able to put it out. Or you can use them both in tandem. You put the baking soda and then you put the lid on the small grease fire, and you should be able to put it out. Now, before even attempting to put it out, I suggest maybe calling 911, get the ball rolling, have it on the way just in case it gets out of hand, right? A fire doubles in size every 30 seconds. If something else catches on fire, it could turn a bad situation worse. So let us get the ball rolling. Let us be on our way. If you're able to put it out before we get there, great. If not, that's what we're there for, right? Also, even better option is a fire extinguisher, right? It's a great idea to have these at home. One about this size is good for the kitchen. Have it close to the exit of the kitchen, and it works very well to use it from distance. You want to inspect it, make sure there's no dents, cracks, or rust. If you have one, inspect it every so often. And if you're going to buy one, you want to make sure it has 3 classifications. Right? It's A, B, and C. A is for paper and wood, B is for grease fires, and C is for electrical fires. So you want to cover all your bases if you're going to use a fire extinguisher. And if you're going to buy one, make sure it has those. And you can buy them anywhere as far as Lowe's, Home Depot, even Amazon sells them. They're fairly cheap. They're like $25. And it's a good option to have at home. There's a gauge on these. If the needle's in the green, that means it's pressurized. That means it's good to go and you're able to use it. If the needle is in the red on the gauge, that means it's lost pressure. You have used it and it's time for a new one. Now, there's ways to repressurize it, but that requires more tools, more money. My opinion is to just buy a new fire extinguisher when you're done with this one. They're not too expensive, like I said. So now, 80% of the people who have fire extinguishers don't know how to use them. So a good way to remember how to use them is this acronym we have is PASS, pass. The P is for pull. There's usually a pin on these. You're going to pull that pin. A is for aim. You're going to aim it at the base of the fire. S is for squeeze. You're going to squeeze the handle, right? The last S is for side to side. That's PASS. Simple to use it, but in the heat of the moment, or people get nervous, they forget how to use the fire extinguisher. That's a good way to remember. PASS. And also, just as important, or maybe even a little more important, are smoke alarms. You want to make sure you have working smoke alarms at home, carbon monoxide alarms. You want to make sure that you have these that they work at home. The new ones last 10 years now. They have built-in lithium-ion batteries, and you don't have to swap them out anymore. You don't have to swap the battery out anymore. If you still have batteries that you have to swap out the battery, those are a little outdated. It's time for a new one. Get yourself these batteries that last 10 years. The FDNY actually has a program with the Red Cross, right? Where we basically come to your home and install these free of charge, right? I'll leave the number at the end of the presentation where you can call, set up, we leave a voicemail, we'll call you to set up an appointment that works for you. We basically install these wherever you need them, as many as you need, and they're fairly expensive, they're like $40, $50, so why not let the city come and install them free of charge? The only buildings we don't install them in are NYCHA buildings. If you live in a NYCHA building, they provide their own alarms. This is for every other type of building and or home. Right, so definitely make sure you have these, check them every 2-3 months, make sure that they're working, make sure that they're functioning. We also have the same program to provide alarms for anyone who's deaf or hard of hearing. These special alarms where we provide, they're called lifetime alarms, where this is basically this piece is put on the bedside, and the other connected piece is a plug that goes under your pillow, so that if this senses smoke or carbon monoxide, the plug vibrates and it will wake up whoever is sleeping. I'm speaking to that person, they won't be able to hear the original smoke alarms. Right, so it's definitely another good option that we have. Another second leading cause of fires in the city are electrical fires, right? We have extensions here. I'm sure everyone has these at home. Be very careful with these extensions on these power strips. A good practice is to maybe not connect every outlet or every plug, maybe 1 or 2 feet, not to overload the power strip. Also, a rule of thumb that we have is if it heats something up or it cools something down, it should not be connected to an extension cord. That should be connected directly into the wall. So, for instance, your refrigerators, your dryers, your curling irons, space heaters, air conditioners, anything like that needs to be connected directly into the wall. That requires too much energy. That should not be connected into an extension cord, right? And if you're going to buy an extension cord, make sure it has the UL on it, right? This is what that looks like. It's basically the Underwriters Laboratories. So this is the company that certifies and safety tests these products. You're going to find this symbol on your extension cords, on your appliances, on your batteries. It's also on your smoke alarms, on your lithium-ion batteries. You want to look for this UL mark. That is basically saying that it's a certified quality product and it's safe to use. A lot of people tend to buy these at a 99-cent store. They come home and it's defective and it can start a fire. And if they would have just spent a little bit more money to get a safe product would have been in a better situation. So definitely make sure you look for this symbol when you're buying electrical appliances. Also, you never want to connect one extension cord to another extension cord. See, many homes where people do that, it could cause a short behind the wall, or it could cause the actual extension cord to overheat, right? It could cause a big fire. So definitely avoid doing that. Also, a safer option is if you use candles at home, be very careful. You want to make sure there's 3 feet of space around the candle, then you go away from anything that's flammable. Make sure you turn it off if you're leaving the room. Don't fall asleep. It's for temporary use only, right? And there's a safer battery operated candle. Maybe not as aesthetically pleasing, but it's a safer option. Just to buy a battery operated candle still looks nice. The same thing with a space heater. He still causes a lot of fires in the city. Be very careful with space heaters. Like the same way you would treat a candle, make sure there's 3 feet of space around it, away from anything that could light on fire, anything that's flammable. And this is also for temporary use only, right? For 1-2 hours. Don't leave it on from one night to the next. If you're sleeping, make sure you turn it off, right? There's also a safety feature on many ones where if this falls over, it turns off automatically. You have to pick it back up and turn it on for you to use it again. Also, the new ones come with timers. You can set a timer on it so it'll shut off on its own. But my personal opinion is just definitely don't leave it on and not be in the room. Or go to sleep while it's on. All right, another thing I want to touch on is knowing the type of building that you live in. It's very important. Whether it's a non-fireproof building or it's a fireproof building. And a non-fireproof building, the way you can know is, in general, if it's 6 floors or below, that's a non-fireproof building. If it has fire escapes, that's a non-fireproof building. And these types of buildings, the fire tends to spread very fast. So you're gonna want to evacuate as fast as possible. You're gonna want to execute your escape plan as fast as possible. Make sure everyone gets out as fast as possible to the street to be able to call 911. Now, in a fireproof building, those buildings are generally from 7 floors and above. And those buildings are made of fire-resistant materials. The doors have fire ratings. They're sprinklered, and they're made to withstand more heat and resistance to fire. So in those buildings, if there's a fire, usually the fire is going to be isolated to that part of the building. So your best bet is to actually stay in your apartment if there's a fire in that building, and find a fireproof building. So what you would do is you shut the door, maybe put a wet towel on the floor so that the smoke doesn't come in, and crack a window and let the fire department get there to give you further instructions. And that's only if the fire is not in your apartment and it's in a separate part of the building. Because if you try to leave the smoke, the toxic smoke could be in the hallways, it could be in the stairways, and that tends to overwhelm people and could potentially be fatal. 9 times out of 10, what tends to overcome someone is the smoke itself, the toxic smoke, right? So, but if the fire is in your apartment, where you are, and no matter what, whether it's not fireproof or fireproof, you need to evacuate as fast as possible. But the most important thing I want you to get from this is that if you are evacuating, is to shut the door behind you, right? You don't want the smoke, you don't want the fire to spread. Smoke goes up, fire goes up, and it'll start to spread to the rest of the building very fast and overwhelm anyone who's in the hallway or in the floors above. Right, so definitely make sure you close the door behind you in case of a fire. And it also gives us more time as the fire department to respond. Just every second counts as a firefighter. So shut that door, just gives us more time to set up and be able to execute our job. Right. And also very important to have a fire escape plan. Right. I know a lot of schools have fire drills, so we should have something similar at home. Right? Knowing your exits, knowing where the fire escapes are, knowing how to open your windows, knowing where to go in case of a fire. If there's children at home, who's responsible for grabbing the child and evacuating? So those are things that need to be considered and talked about with whoever is living in the household. Right? And another thing I want to touch on are lithium-ion batteries. I know everybody knows they're causing a lot of fires in the city. They're still trying to come out with more regulation on as far as these batteries, making sure that they have the UL on it, making sure that they're certified, verified products. But I would say personally, be very careful. My personal opinion, do not have them indoors. A lot of these batteries are just exploding spontaneously. Also because people aren't charging them correctly. Once they're fully charged, they need to be disconnected. The battery can potentially overheat and explode, right? And you want to make sure you use the power cord from the manufacturer, and the charger from the manufacturer. If you buy an aftermarket charger, that could potentially overheat the e-bike or e-scooter, whatever it is that you have. Also, storing them in the correct place, not nowhere where it's too hot or too cold. Just not having them in the house. I've been to plenty of fires, and these fires spread extremely fast and give off very toxic smoke. So it's basically up to the super and the property owner right now is whether or not they should be allowed in the home or not, or in the building or not, until more regulation is passed. Right, so definitely be very careful. If you see any deformity or if you see any batteries off gassing, giving off a weird smell, definitely call 911. Let us come remove the battery or make sure that everything's all right. Okay, so definitely be careful with e-bikes, because what a lot of people do is they come home and they park it at the entrance of their house or the building. Now, if that battery explodes, what could potentially go wrong there? That's covering your exit. Now, one of your exits is blocked off, now you have to resort to either a window, or hopefully you have another exit where you can escape from. So definitely be very careful with these e-bikes and just lithium-ion batteries. Also, basically the same battery that's in your phone. Lithium-ion battery, be very careful with those batteries as well, but they're not exploding and coming in as defective as the e-bike stuff. But definitely, I would say don't sleep on your phone. A lot of people tend to put their phone under their pillow when they sleep. And there's been cases where they actually explode and burn and hurt whoever's sleeping on their phone. Because those appliances, like your laptop, need ventilation, they need room to breathe. So put them on your bedside or somewhere away from your bed. And the last thing I'll touch on are still the third leading cause of fires in the city are smoking. People who smoke indoors, whatever it is that they may smoke. People fall asleep. I can't tell you how many fires I've been to where people fall asleep while smoking and it'll fall on their couch or on their mattress. The whole room goes up on fire, unfortunately. So definitely if you're taking medication that may make you drowsy, don't smoke or smoke outside. So you just try to avoid any potential fires that can happen indoors. And that's pretty much it. That's a quick fire safety presentation on everything I had. I'll put the number for the free smoke alarms on the chat. And if you have any questions, I'll take any questions right now.
Hi, that was really informative. Thank you so much. We have a question in our chat from Deborah Valentine. She asked if we could get any of those oven mitts, if you could send any to the community board.
We used to give them out. I think they just started not getting too cost effective, so we couldn't give them out anymore.
Okay. I was also wondering if it was possible. I was talking to somebody about getting calling the FDNY to get the carbon monoxide or the smoke detectors, and they said that they feel uncomfortable with people putting it into their house. They wanted to know if it was possible to get it that they could install it by themselves.
There's carbon monoxide alarms that we give out, but generally we don't just hand them out anymore because what we've seen were happening, we're handing out the smoke alarms and people were selling them to make a profit off of them. So we tend to just install them ourselves. But I know if you want to contact whoever you organize this with, they can give you more information on that. But generally, our team comes and installs it themselves.
Okay, I had another question. I happen to love like those scents that you plug into the wall, like it lasts for a month or so. And my husband thinks it's a fire safety hazard. So I said we were having this meeting. I was going to ask about them today. Do you think that it's a fire hazard, or do you think that we could have those things, like they had sell it in like Bath and Beyond or Bed Bath, the Body Works. They smell good. You plug them into the wall.
Yeah. I haven't seen too many instances where they cause fires or fires behind the wall. I would say just make sure not to connect too many things into that outlet. Like if you're going to connect another extension cord below where you have a scent connected, just try not to put too much on that outlet. That's my suggestion.
So if it's an outlet that it's there by itself, it's just sitting there on the wall by itself, we're good, right?
I think that should be okay.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from board members? My co-chair, Varda.
Yeah, me, of course I ask questions. Couple of quick ones. First one, of the lithium-ion batteries for e-bikes, if you have a legal battery and you follow the directions, are the odds infinitesimal that it will explode, or is it just something endemic to the entire type of battery?
Yeah, if you have a certified product and you're maintaining them correctly, they should be fine. It's very good.
Okay.
The chances of it spontaneously exploding dramatically decrease.
Great. Second on batteries. At one point, I think it was the City of Yes for carbon neutrality. The city is trying to encourage the use of solar panels and batteries either on the houses, adjacent to the houses, to store the energy that can then be reused, in times that it's necessary. And I seem to recall we were under the impression that the fire department had not really been consulted on the safety of encouraging this kind of development. So just curious if you yourself had any experience or know anything about the batteries that are used to store solar power that are adjacent to homes.
Honestly, no, I haven't really been spoken
Okay.
to on that, not versed too much on the solar
That's
energy.
fine. I was just curious because, we were scratching our heads saying, gee, you'd think you'd go to FDNY first. Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, good questions, very good questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
All right, let me put the number on the chat just before I forget.
Hindi, shall I take over at this point?
Yes, please.
Okay. It is my great pleasure. Jason, are you out there?
Yes, I am, Borden. Glad to be here.
Awesome. This is Jason Lane, who's the Chief Program Officer of Exalt Youth, which provides programs and services for justice-involved youth. And on a personal note, I ask that you all pay really close attention to Jason because he and I met at our gym, Retro Fitness, little plug there. And I will tell you, this man can lift weights maybe as good as Sean. Our district manager is actually a hardcore weightlifter. So maybe we can do a grudge match later. But in the interim, I insist that you all pay really close attention. Otherwise, who knows what's going to happen to me at the gym in the morning. So with that, Jason, I give it to you.
Borden, thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. Once again, my name is Jason Aline. I am the Chief Program Officer at Exalt Youth. Lifelong New Yorker. I have made my career throughout a number of youth serving and workforce development nonprofits around New York City, Harlem Children's Zone, Harlem RBI, which is now Dream, Friends of the Children, in Brooklyn, the HOPE program, which is a well-known workforce development program. And I've now been with Exalt Youth for the last 8 months, heading up their program department. Thrilled to speak with you here today. Exalt, although we are now located at 17 Battery Place in Manhattan, our roots are in Brooklyn. Our office was formerly on Remsen Street, and we continue to have a large amount of our youth population that we serve come from Brooklyn, roughly about 50%. And so today, we want to speak to you a little bit about what it is that we do at Exalt, our mission, our program model, and a little bit of some of the just transformative results we've been able to garner since our inception back in 2006. So I'm going to share my screen. Sure. Can everyone see my screen?
I think so, but it's blank right now.
Oh, hold on. Sorry, I'm not familiar with WebEx.
It did go to a screen.
Let me on. Let me try once again.
Still a white blank screen.
Huh.
Huh.
Gonna give it one more try, then I'm going to present. I'm looking at
That's fine. Whatever works for you.
Yeah, so I don't want to hold up people's time. So Exalt was started in 2006 as an offshoot of one of the most well-known ATIs, alternatives to incarceration, called Cases. And we started incubated in Cases from their career exploratory program, really at the backdrop, really dealing with a lot of the issues that came about from the 90s, of course, the United States being the high school dropout capital of the world, as well as dealing with the ramifications of the crack cocaine era, as well as the rise in mass incarceration. And so when Exalt was started in 2006, it went out to really accomplish three main things. And so these three main things were: how do we actively re-engage young people who have been disengaged from their schools? How do we make young people more employable? And how do we make sure that young people do not have further interactions with the criminal justice system? And so what we came up with was a 4.5-month program that really focused on academic advancement, as you said, employability, and criminal justice involvement. The young people that Exalt serves, we have a very specific profile in that we serve young people who are between the ages of 15 to 19 and have been impacted by the criminal justice system. So when we say impacted, we work with young people on the spectrum of the criminal justice system. So this is everybody from someone who may have just gotten arrested to somebody who may have actually been in a detention center, or someone who may be coming home actually from Rikers and has a conviction that they've dealt with. So we actually 67% of our young people come to us with serious charges, either high-level felonies or misdemeanors. And so we'll get into a little bit of how we're able to garner results with them. But taking through our program model, one of the things that separates us from other alternative to incarceration programs is that our program is completely voluntary. So as most of you know, ATIs are typically court mandated. And so we go through an exhaustive interview process with all of our referrals that are young people that are referred to us. And so when we say voluntary, our young people are accepted and then have to accept the invitation to join our program. And so that is one of the things that separates us. And one of the reasons why our program model is structured like that is largely because we believe that the buy-in to our theory of change and our program model works much better when young people accept the change that we're offering them. I think as most people know, when you try to mandate teenagers to do much of anything, there is often a high level degree of pushback. And particularly for young people that have been decimated by the criminal justice system or involved with the criminal justice system, and often have to deal with systems and institutions telling them what to do. So for our interview process and our initial engagement process lasts about 4 weeks. Each individual young person referred to us goes through 3 different interviews with who we call our program coordinators, who are the gatekeepers of our program, and make sure to screen and interview everyone that comes in. Once they are accepted, they go through a 6-week pre-internship training. And so our pre-internship training does 2 main things. One, as we said, it re-engages our young people's love of learning. The majority of our young people come to us reading on a 4th to 6th grade level. 4th to 6th grade level, as well as chronic overage, undercredited, and chronically disengaged from their institutions. And one of the things that we found over the course of the last 18 years is that our young people do not hate learning. They actually love learning. They just simply hate the schools that they are in. And so our curriculum is largely based in what we call edutainment, which is bringing in pop culture, bringing in different cultural elements to really infuse our curriculum with things that are culturally relevant and culturally connected to our young people. And so in addition to re-engaging them with their love of learning and teaching them about things like mass incarceration, the school to prison pipeline, gender identity, and a variety of different topics that apply to them and their lived experiences, we also work with them on workforce and job development skills. So working with them on how to craft a resume, working with them on interviewing skills, mock interviewing skills. All of this over the course of 6 weeks to get them ready for an internship placement. So 100% of our young people that finish the 6-week internship are placed in high-level internships with our over 150 partners around New York City. One of the things that we stress with our internships is that we say they're high level because they are internships that they would not usually get, particularly with their status of being criminal justice involved, on their own. And so our internship partners include places like the Innocence Project, the Children's Defense Fund, DBI, and a variety of different partners from both the corporate, government, and nonprofit sector. And so that internship placement lasts 8 weeks. We cover the payments for our young people for their internship. So we pay our core program participants $18 an hour. Exalt from 2006, when we started this program, has always been ahead of the minimum wage. And so all of our young people, starting actually in the 4th week when they're getting ready for their internship, start to be paid. And so that internship lasts 8 weeks. After that internship is completed, they go into a 2-week post-internship phase in which we are debriefing with them about their experiences, about what they learned from it. All of our young people come to us without any prior work experience. So this is actually their first actual career exploratory opportunity. And then after those 2 weeks, they graduate from the program and they proceed to our alumni program, which supports our young people with either finishing high school, since we do work with young people that are 15 to 19, or their post-secondary endeavors, getting into school, colleges and universities, and also connecting them to, if they want to go a different route, with workforce development and workforce training opportunities. So over the course of these 4.5 months in our last 18 years, we've been able to garner some pretty significant results with our program. And what we noticed was 95% of our young people that are involved with do not recidivate within 2 years of graduation. This is way above both the state and national average. 98% of our young people are actively engaged in high school and are on track to graduate by age 20. 76% of the young people that come to us with open cases have their cases either reduced or dismissed. The other part of this I should mention is that we also have, in addition to our program department, what we call our court advocacy team, which works in conjunction with DAs. We have a very great relationship with the Brooklyn DA, Eric Gonzalez. So all of the local DAs, as well as judges, a lot of the defenders' offices, and so really building inroads with the different aspects of the criminal justice system here in New York to support and advocate for our young people with open cases. I should also mention that both the DAs, all the DA offices, as well as judges and different referral partners that we have do come from the criminal justice system as well in New York. I think as everyone knows, it is very difficult to get all the individual parties in the criminal justice system to agree on anything, which is why we often say that our referral partners and our inroads with the criminal justice system in New York happen because regardless of where you stand on the aisle of this issue, you recognize the power of Exalt, the model, and our results. And then finally, 100% of our young people become more employable. This year, we will serve 550 youth in New York City, as well as 475 young people in our alumni program. This is a really exciting time for our organization as well, as we are also getting ready to expand to Syracuse, our first replication and expansion project. We will serve 600 more young people, unique young people next year for FY25, as well as 500 alumni. And so we have, as I said earlier, we've had a great relationship with communities in Brooklyn, as Brooklyn has continued to be the main place where our young people reside. And yeah, we would love to continue to get the word out there about Exalt and to really get the word out about just the transformative nature of our work in terms of really changing the narrative for young people that have been impacted by the juvenile justice system and what they are capable of and succeeding, and really continuing to allow our work to transform that narrative. So yes, I see quite a few hands and quite a few questions.
Oh, I've not been paying attention to who put up what. So Hindi, you have a question? Go ahead and start.
I do. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, go ahead.
First of all, thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
So I am a teacher. I work in a public school. I was just wondering, what qualifications do students need, or does the youth need to get involved in such a program, and how would,
Yeah, so great question. So the age group that we work with is 15 to 19.
I'm
And
sorry, I'm sorry. It's
I'm sorry, it's 15 to 19?
15 to 19, okay.
Yes, and so also having some prior exposure to the criminal justice system, as I was saying earlier, that can be the entire spectrum, either just getting arrested or actually having been convicted. The only offenses that we do not take from young people in terms of their prior criminal justice involvement are arson, sexual assault cases, or murder. So any case or conviction besides that is a young person that is eligible. We also ask that the young person be enrolled in school or looking to be enrolled in school. I should mention that we also have an educational advocacy team that ensures that if any young person is referred to us and is not in school or looking to transfer, that educational advocate will work with them to enroll them in a school that is more aligned with their educational needs, or get them transferred to one of our partner schools. So we do work with a variety of partner schools around New York City, Brooklyn, including Urban Dove, Judith SK, and a variety of different D79 schools.
Thank you so much.
Okay, let's see. Deborah Valentin had put a question in the chat. What percentage of your children come from Crossroads? My sister is a youth development specialist at Crossroads.
I could definitely get that information back to this group. I don't have that specific number right here, but I know Crossroads is a referral partner for ours, so I will definitely get that information back to this group.
So my comment would be your numbers are great, kids coming in and then coming out and what happens to them. Are you in a position where you can offer positions to everyone you want to, or would you need more funding? Do you feel that there's excess need out there for you to be able to offer more spots?
Yeah, so great question. So roughly about in terms of our funding, I'll start with that. So roughly about 95% of our funding comes from the philanthropic community. We purposely have started off with no or limited government funding so that we have the freedom to kind of create our model and also monitor our results and change as is necessary. I think, as everyone knows, government funding, while including large pots of money, often comes with a lot of red tape. And so we currently only have one government contract with MOCJ. And we are continuing to look, particularly with our expansion coming up, how we can expand funding revenues and streams. Our current operating budget is 8 million. That will be expanding to roughly about 10 million upcoming for this year. And in terms of actually being able to take young people in, Barden, one of the things that we say is that we really do want to make sure that every young person that is referred to us gets the opportunity to interview with us and gets the opportunity to see if Exalt is the right fit. We do not have to chase referrals, thankfully. Just this year, we've had roughly about 1,400 referrals to us for 550 slots. And so that is why our interview process is exhaustive. One of the things that we do really stress, and I want to stress to this group, is that we want to make sure our young people are actively making the choice to be a part of Exalt. And so our interview process is exhaustive in terms of making sure that this is something that they want to do. But we will give every referral that is referred to us the opportunity to interview and come in.
That's great. It probably gives them a sense of confidence alone to,
Yes.
be asked to come in and have this discussion with you and to be treated, with respect.
Absolutely.
So kudos. Any other questions? Then, Carl, go ahead. Carl Henry Cesar, our board chair.
Hey folks, good evening. So committee chairs Barden and Hindi, thank you so much for today's meeting. This is really great. And Jason, thank you for presenting. I have a few questions. So the first, as you were mentioning, the youth who can apply, right, from age 15 to 19. When you say impact by the criminal justice system, the question I have is if there is a youth within that age group who themselves haven't been in the system in some way, but they have a direct family member who has, would that count or no? Like you have to have, either been, convicted or somewhere in the process. That's my first question.
Yeah, Carl, great question. So yes, it has to be a direct impact for the individual that is applying.
Okay, got you. Thank you for that. And then the second question too is when you mention the budget being 8 million, is that strictly operational or is that like some split of operational and capital?
Yeah, so it's a large part of that budget goes towards operations and program. As you can imagine, being at 17 Battery Place, that rent is quite expensive. But the large majority of our budget goes towards program services.
Okay, got you. And then the last question I have too is there's like the closing and then not closing of Rikers has been in the news for some time, right? And so has that process for that location impacted your work? And if so, how have you seen an impact?
Yeah, so I would say that it impacts our work in terms of us building coalitions with other individual organizations that are in the criminal justice space. And so we were a big part of the Raise the Age campaign, and big proponents of that as well. And so a lot of the other organizations that have been focused on the Close the Rikers campaign, they will often ask us for letters of support, advocacy letters, those type of things. It is not a specific initiative that we work on directly, but because we have so many other partner organizations in the criminal justice space that do work with us, we are always readily providing letters of support to them as partners in this work.
Okay, thank you so much for answering my questions. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Florencia, you have a question? Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, thank you for the presentation, Jason.
You're welcome.
Just wanted to know, have you heard of God Squad's Flatbush Leadership Academy? Are you affiliated with them in any way? Have you worked with them? That's one. And the other question is, do you speak at other events or venues or like churches? And if so, can you put your information in the chat?
Absolutely. So we do want to always speaking and trying to get the word out about Exalt as we continue to expand our services and really have a bigger impact in New York City. So yes, our program coordinators and that department readily do speeches and connect with local organizations and CBOs to do presentations just like this. And I am not familiar with that organization that you just mentioned, but would love to get their contact information.
Okay, thank you. No problem. I will pass it on.
Thanks, Valencia. Any other, well, I see Sean, you got a question. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure that you know that we do have you on the list for our annual youth conference, where we get about 60 organizations and 300, 400, 500 young people between the ages of 12 and 21 walking through the doors, but mostly in the cohort that you're aligned with age group wise. And then also we'll keep you on the nonprofit roundtable list where a lot of these organizations participate and we build a lot of bridges through that event as well. So we look forward to talking to you in the upcoming year.
Absolutely. Thank you so
And Joe, you got a question? Go ahead. Joe, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You're
There it
popping
is.
in and out a little bit.
Yeah. Jason?
Yes.
You're muted, Joe.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to get it. Yeah, I'm sorry. Jason, thank you and God bless you for all you're doing. Quick question. Do you have your program seems to be for children or for youngsters. Would you know of any program for older folks?
Absolutely. So I would definitely recommend Osborne Association is one that does fantastic work and that we have a relationship with. I'm trying to think of Exodus Transitional Community, which is located in Harlem, is another one that works, does a lot of reentry work with adults as well. And there is another Avenues for Justice is another one. And there,
Jason,
yes.
if I could kindly ask you to give them to Sean.
I
so
have
we
them.
could.
I know these groups, Joe, and Osborne comes to our events.
God bless you.
Sean
Thank
knows
you.
everything.
Yes.
She's amazing.
Those are the three that I would strongly recommend that we have absolutely fantastic relationships as well. And getting out, staying out is another one as well.
Great. I don't see any other questions unless somebody feels impelled at the last minute. Then otherwise I will let Jason go because I know he has to get to sleep to get to the gym in the morning before I do, to steal all my machines.
Yes.
And thank you, Jason. Thank you all of you for joining us this evening. I'd first ask, is there any old business or new business we'd like to raise?
Thank you, everybody.
And without that, then I'll take a motion to adjourn. Nobody? We have to stay here?
Motion to adjourn.
Awesome. Then with that, I again thank you all, and thus ends our meeting. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks all. Thank you so much.